What's up? We're going to talk about a couple quick things. Primarily, this is for my squire, number one guy, Tiberius. The thing to keep in mind for what we're going to talk about here is that this is stuff that I've been applying kind of recently, and it works very well in the game that I try to play for how I fight. So it meshes well for me, and maybe it'll mesh well for you. I wouldn't focus too much on it, but it is something to keep in mind, and you can always try it in between fights. There's plenty to work on, so don't worry too much. The things we're going to talk about is soft hand style, as Noah or Megiddo has named it. We will talk about the intercepting sword is more appropriate than intercepting fist. It makes more sense there, but intercepting fist. And Jack Dempsey's Dempsey roll, basically, and how I've been trying to apply these things to the way that I fight. So we will kick off with a small or a short explanation as to what each thing is. So the soft hand style, the idea, and this is something that he coined, that he says that I'm doing. It was never a conscious decision in the way that I fight to do this, but it's something that that he thinks observationally is what I'm doing. So the idea is that I'm never hitting anyone with an excessive amount of force. It's always pretty light-ish. I've gotten less light calls as I've been doing more fitness and adjusting my equipment to be a little stouter. When the swords have been super soft, and not in the sense that they're illegal, but like without a piece of a harder foam somewhere in this section, certain shots get missed, and that's probably based on the way that I hit them. So anyways, some small adjustments have made people call light less. Anyways, so the idea is that I essentially am throwing my shots. I'm throwing them quickly, I'm not throwing them slow, but I'm not throwing them excessively. It's basically with enough momentum or force for it to make legal contact. I don't need to come from back here. It's not a lot of overly telegraphed stuff, not that you can't, but at the point of contact, I'm essentially just hitting them with the weight of the weapon. Like this is just my arm coming through. There's no force. This is just my arm coming through, and that's it. I'm not cranking my hip. I'm not cranking my arm. I'm not cranking this. I'm not overly muscling into it. I'm just loose hand even. My hand's barely on this. I'm just kind of holding it with two fingers. It's just kind of hanging out. And when I go to throw the shot, it's still, hopefully it won't wake the baby here, but I still and it hits with plenty of percussive sound. It stops, it deflects, it does everything. So soft hands is essentially just the weight of my arm and equipment coming through on the follow through, or just reaching out and touching them. It doesn't have to be very much. It's this soft hands kind of style, and it leads to them being hit many times without necessarily out of force. Some people call it light. I've played a game where I try to hit them as many times as I can, as light as I can, with them just calling dead or whatever. And the funniest times for this is when you end up inside, like with their weapon and their gear, and I just pop, 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 pop. Because I don't have to. This is slow. And that's some of that exercise that I showed you before about doing this and where that comes in. Just kind of, all of these are legal hits, and they'll end up sounding like, you can think of it like rabbit punches and stuff like that. Or the Ip Man style of Wing Chun, where he's just hitting that guy like 800 times. It's the same idea. Like, I've hit people enough times where they're going, I don't know how many times you've hit me anymore. I have no idea. I'm dead. I'm like, cool. And this comes into play a lot in single for me. This is actually pretty huge for the way that I do single sword. Here's the secret to my single sword. It's real simple. I try to get them to commit to an outside throw to my left arm. And when they do this, I'm just trading my left arm for their sword arm. And I'm usually getting them to throw, intercepting their shot with my arm, pop, 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 through, boom, 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 ba, 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 ba. I mean, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And by the time they've hit me a second time, they've already been hit twice. So like their second shot's dead, they're dead. They're trying to switch, but oh man, you're dead. You've been hit 4 times. And it works really well. And it's not even all I committed because you can pop, pop, and you can move. That was 1, 2, block, throw again, pop, 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 into whatever sword side hit, pop, pop, boom, boom, boom. So soft hands, it's kind of neat. It's just a lot of this motion from the elbow, a lot of this motion from the elbow. I can throw, I mean, that's a shoulder in there, boom, boom, little elbow, little shoulder, little wrist, boom, pop, pop, pop. You can still wrap in that, pop, pop, pop. Wrap, throw it from the shoulder. It's soft, it's easy. We can still and throw a big one. You don't have to. So you mix it in. It keeps people guessing. I throw this light stuff and I'll throw in something big. So that's soft hands. As I understand how he's explained it, which is just more like a terminology for the way that I tend to fight. The intercepting fist concept is pretty straightforward. As my opponent starts to throw, I'm intercepting their shot with something, whether it be my sword, my arm, my shield, stepping in, and I cut off the angles to the thing that they're doing and taking control of what's going on. So that can be as simple as, here's the bend in this crazy shield, as I was showing you earlier in that picture. It's pretty cool. Gives me some interesting coverage. It's sort of low strapped, kind of comes through. Once you throw crazy stuff like this, which is kind of rad. But that's a different thing. So anyways, the idea, I've got my equipment. Let's say they go to throw a high cross. We can intercept that with my weapon. I could intercept that across with my shield. I can step in and catch that shot. And I'm stopping the angle before they get to throw it. It's mostly like a punch shield concept that Michael taught me, Sir Michael Hamler of God, where he would throw a shot and put the shield in the way. And so I've just been working on ways to apply that same concept with all of my equipment, or anything, with my arm, my body, my movement, my sword, my shield. I guess technically you do it with your head, that's kind of shitty, so don't do that. But the idea is making everything able to do that. Some of my favorites is if I can get them to start throwing like a board shoulder by like stepping through, and here it comes, and moving this out to intercept it in its point of travel, and then punishing them. It's a fun counter. I like it as an interesting counter. So the intercepting fist concept is simple. You just intercept their shit on the way in. And I can do this going forward. I can do this coming backwards. As soon as they start to move their hand, I can throw out and just hit their sword. Or another classic way, we went over this a little bit, is my sword side hit high cross counter, I guess, some name for it, forcing them to throw to this high quadrant over my arm so that I can throw my fist into it. So I'm throwing my block into this as I come in. So like I do whatever, I'm hiding my steps forward, my feet are moving forward while I do this. It's like, here we go, we're coming in. I get them to throw at the arm, we're pushing my block into this. And then you kind of have control over their equipment. And then you can throw into those cool inside crosses, sword side hips, whatever it takes. And yeah, seems to be okay. Same thing works for down spears or pole arms. They try to stab at you. You can try to intercept it on the way and go in. It's just like parrying, I guess. But so that's been playing around with that. It's not always perfect, but it helps if I have a good idea of what they're going to throw. If I can force them to throw at something I want, I can start trying to intercept it. And it's not so much like blocking it at the last, like I'm blocking it here, I blocked it with my shield. It's not the same idea. I want to catch them in the process of starting to throw their shot before they get a chance to make their rotation or whatever, because then it turns it into like a chop. But if here comes the wrap and I intercept it here and they can't wrap around anymore, cool. Like I've stopped their shot and essentially made myself safe aggressively. I've aggressively used my defense with my sword or shield to mess it up. And then moving on to the Jack Dempsey stuff, or the Dempsey roll here. It isn't perfect for what we're doing, right? Like in boxing, you just want to minimize damage and slip and get it to clip you. Getting clipped here in amp guard is a hit. So we don't want that to happen. But same principle as taking advantage of getting them to throw at something that you want them to throw at so that you can punish them is pretty cool. So since I've been doing some of this closing stuff, I'm working on how to come up with ways to just do stuff in the grind and see what really transpires from it. One of my simplest and most favorite things right now is finding a way in, opening with something. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything too great. Again, it depends on what they do. If I open over here and they throw there, I might do something else. But in this case, I'm going to try to get them to throw at board shoulder. And there's plenty of people who, in a very simplified way, are just like, hey, check out my shoulder. You want to throw at that? So they can, ha-ha, and check out the arm. For what I'm doing, I'm trying to find a good way to close in very aggressively here on them, get them to commit to like a board shoulder. And when they commit to the board shoulder, I end up with a lot of control, because if they commit to it, I can do all kinds of things that break rules for fighting. I can start putting my shield anywhere I want. I mean, this is totally acceptable if they've committed 100% to it. So like, I'm just not too worried about it. So anyways, so to get that weaving kind of motion here on the way in, it can solicit different shoulders, because people look for the dip. They can see over my shoulder. I'm not tall. Since I'm not tall, this is a high probability kind of location that people will throw at. Well, sweet. That's super good for me. So I'm seeing if I can get that on camera here. As I start to do this weave, they start to see more. Like, you can see my sword arm over here. Can't quite see my shoulder, but if you were a person, you were my opponent, you'd probably see over here. And that's perfect. If I get my timing and my weave right on the way in, it weaves. I'm weaving off this way. They're starting to see this. And then my roll back is part of that same kind of rolling defense that they talk about. Instead of moving your shield, you then turn your body. Well, cool. We're applying that here on the way in with the same kind of roll. And as I do that roll, I'm still standing up with this thing, kind of making that rotation. And it can turn into these shields as they throw this thing. And when they throw that board shoulder, cool, I'm in great shape. The timing's got to be right. Got to get them to commit, but my D is still super tight. I'm willing to move my arm to keep myself safe as I kind of roll in. And then we're able to just kind of duck dive, dip dodge, 5D's a dodgeball. I guess from the back, just being my opponent, I might be able to start getting this thing weaving. And then oh god, that's super slick. Well, the forward normally move, I suppose, but when you go to push off, you kind of roll in here, and I'm able to throw this thing up, and then you can start throwing whatever you want here. For amp guard, where it's different than Dempsey rolls, we're not just throwing big left-right hooks, but you have the option to throw left-right combo shots, and since we just have to hit them once, whichever one ends up working is super good. So like when I roll in here on this, if I'm rolling over this when it gets to this shoulder, this step up turns into that shoulder, turns into sword side hit, and into ass wrap. And I'm not pushing my feet off here. I'm not moving, and this is mostly because my mat is slippery on this floor. But that's the idea. So ideally, you come in, you keep weaving, you're rolling, and you're looking for like what's predictable and what they're gonna throw into here. And you can always intercept. So all these things kind of come together. So the intercepting fist part, if they do decide to high cross over at the shoulder, we can intercept this on the way in, pushing their gear up and dropping the like sword side hips. So it's kind of rad. It's all coming together, and I super dig it right now. This still needs work, but the idea is there, forcing them to throw, showing them something, and then applying these other things to it. And then without going into it, because I could talk about it forever, this stuff has been working really well with the other things that I do on a regular basis for fighting. But some of this is worth trying. I wouldn't worry too much about the Dempsey stuff. That's pretty rough. It's pretty hard. You got to get the timing and the closing down super well, and if you aren't proficient at closing, you're going to have a bad time, and it's going to be hard to do. So. I mean, that's anything that you start learning, so like I don't want to discourage you, but work on the stuff that you're working on. For anyone who, if I show this to the general public, this is just like one part of many things that you can do for fighting. Some goofy stuff. So, anyways, that's it. Good luck. We'll chat again later. I'll make more vids when I can. Later, folks.